The next interview is with Bonnie Silsbe. Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Bennett. I am a librarian at the Bayport-Blue Public Library. This is Wednesday, May 22nd, and we're here today interviewing Bonnie Silsbe. Welcome, Bonnie.
Hello, Wendy.
Now, Bonnie, could you please start by telling me your full name?
It's Faustina Jane Rhodes Silsbe. I really dislike my first name. My mother made it up. She said it's after a Dr. Foster who saved her life. I always said, he saved your life, and I'm stuck with the name. We were not allowed to use nicknames in school back then, but the kids called me Force. My family and close friends called me Bonnie. The family said I sounded like a pet chicken named Bonnie when I was born. So I'm named after a doctor and or a chicken. And my brother gave me the name Jane, my middle name. And when I met him in Georgia a few years ago, I have a Cabbage Patch doll named Jane after me now.
And when and where were you born?
I was born on April 19th, 1935, in the house at 89 Park Avenue, Blue Point. I never found out why I wasn't born in a hospital as the rest of my siblings were. My son and his family now own that house.
And where have you lived throughout your lifetime?
I lived in that house till I married in 1955. We then lived in Islip for a few years. In 1958, we bought a house in Islip Terrace. My husband died there in 1990. When I sold that house in 1995, I added an apartment onto my daughter's house in Medford. But I've never lost contact with Blue Point. I visited my parents, went to firemen's parades and tournaments over the years. Now that my son lives there, I visit often and attend the grandchildren's school and church functions. I have to say their high school concerts are great.
Now, how did your parents come to live in Blue Point?
They live in Blue Point probably because my mother's family had settled on Eatondale Avenue's west side, which is part of Bayport, right down the road from Park Avenue, Blue Point. They originally were from Germantown, Brooklyn. My dad's mother was a Hawkins from around the Lake Grove area, so he was very aware of Blue Point.
And what high school did you attend?
Bayport High.
Okay, so now we'll get into personal experiences and memories. Can you tell me a little bit about the jobs that you have had?
As a young teenager, I worked for a very short time in Dr. Breyer's office on Blue Point Avenue. I was petrified. I'm not keen on talking on the phone anyway, and I was afraid someone might have a real emergency. Then while I was in high school, I worked in a greenhouse on Park Avenue, Bayport. After graduating, I worked a short time in J.C. Penney's and Blum's in Patchogue. My very favorite job, though, was running the pet shop for W.T. Grant's in Patchogue. It was located in the building which houses the Patchogue Library now.
Yeah.
I had to leave that special job when we moved to Islip. I was back to the phones at a country club in West Islip. Then I worked for Lilco till I got pregnant with our son, Edward, in 1957.
And why was working at the pet shop your favorite job?
Because I love animals.
How did you meet and marry your spouse?
I met my husband, Alan, in 1953 on a blind date. He was from Bayshore, but it turned out that I'd known his Uncle Height and Aunt May Darrow for years. They were prominent members of Blue Point Baptist Church, where I had attended for years with my family. We were married in that church's parsonage on November 5th, 1955. And by the way, that date is the date shown at the beginning of the movie, Back to the Future.
So how have historical events that you've seen throughout the years, such as storms, war, railroad closings, affected your family and the community?
The main big event I can recall, of course, was World War II. We used to have the lights off sometimes in case there was an air raid. My dad was an air raid warden. I remember hiding under desks at school as a drill in case of a bomb. My parents used some kind of stamps to to be allowed to buy certain things like sugar. And as a child, I used to selfishly be annoyed about most of the noise being about the war. This was even though my sisters both had boyfriends serving in the military. And then there was the 39 hurricane. We lucked out. I recall only having a big black cherry tree fall over in the backyard. It kind of buried a part of itself, leaving a loop, which kept producing cherries for years. I used to climb it and play under it.
Can you describe any summer activities you remember taking part in?
I wasn't part of the mainstream social life in Blue Point, so my summers were spent reading or enjoying my animals. In my immediate neighborhood, I played ring-a-levia with my brother and his friends. He was older than me, so it made it special. I once had what I called a carnival with homemade rides and prizes, even a parade. I published a newspaper with my little printing press. I also wrote little plays which we acted out on a friend's porch. It was fun and not regimented. As a teenager, I had to spend part of my time at Leisure Beach. I was not happy about this, but my father had built a house there because the sea air helped my mother. She had asthma, and the hay fever season really bothered her on Long Island. I spent a couple of weeks in the summer of 1947 at Camp Edie in Bayport. As a teenager, I would fly in a PT-19 airplane, which a boyfriend owned. We flew out of Bayport's little airfield. He was a member of the Civil Air Patrol. One of my girlfriends also belonged to that group. My boyfriend and I sometimes rode his motorcycle on the hill.
The Bayport, do you remember anything about flying out of the aerodrome there?
No, I just liked it, and once he took my father up, and my father got very, very sick. That's about all I remember about the place. It was just an open field with a couple of hangars. So.
Were you scared?
Not me.
No.
We were upside down and everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, fun. And can you tell me anything about Camp Edie?
I have a picture of it, and it was fine, but I'm not used to regimented things, and we had a swim in the awful lake there. I wasn't too happy about it.
And what sort of music do you remember listening to when you were growing up?
I liked some show tunes, like the ones from Oklahoma, and there was doo-wop, of course. Elvis was just getting started to be popular when I was in high school, and I really disliked the big band sound, probably because my sisters liked it.
And how many sisters do you have?
I had two.
Two.
And one brother.
So
and I'm the baby,
You're the
so
baby.
I'm the only one left.
Oh.
Yep.
Well, what foods were cooked for celebrations or special events?
We had our main special food was suet pudding.
Oh.
I think it's an English dessert. The way my mother cooked it, we never knew how it would turn out because she cooked it in a pan of water on a wood stove. The heat was not too steady. Sometimes it would burn, sometimes it wouldn't be cooked completely. But I've learned how to do it in a crock pot. For a few years, we couldn't locate the special suet. It had to be from around the kidneys. And my son Edward located it in a patchwork store a few years ago. We now call it holiday pudding, so no one is turned off by the word suet. It's served with real whipped cream and hard sauce. It's very rich, and you can only eat a little bit at one time, but it is memorable.
Sounds like it.
Yes.
So getting into memories about Blue Point specifically, or Bayport, what is your earliest memory of Blue Point?
To me, it was pretty quiet. Quiet enough that at one time, a couple of little girls, around 8 or 9, picked violets in the cemetery and sold them for 5 or 10 cents. I got home an hour or so late that day, and it was the only time my father ever spanked me. Parents could spank kids in those days. I lived in the northern part of Blue Point, so it was kind of rural, not like the rest of the town. I even had a dog that would get loose occasionally, and the neighbors would call me to go and pick him up because he would sit on your porch and not let them out of their house. And it was safe enough back then that my mother would lock the door and leave the key in the lock.
Are there any places in Blue Point that stand out the most in your mind?
Just the schools, the library, which I spent a lot of time in, and the little post office by the grammar school. And in fact, I used to go to the store there that was by there, and after school I would always ask for a glass of water. And I think his name was Bob, the owner. He got annoyed and gave me seltzer water one day, and I never asked for water again. And of course, we used to go very seldom, but we went occasionally to Flo's hot dog stand.
What kind of local events or gatherings do you remember?
At the end of the school year, in grade school, we had races and prizes. They called it Field Day. And the Blue Point Baptist Church would have a picnic at Sunken Meadow Park in the summer. They also had vacation Bible school for a week. And on Memorial Day, the firemen would march in a big parade, the big parade, in Sayville. And then they had their own little one most of the time down Blue Point Avenue.
Did you go to that parade most years?
Yes.
Growing up?
Yes. My father and my brother were firemen, so we went.
What did residents of Blue Point do for a living when you were growing up?
I really don't know. I know my father was a carpenter. He also worked for a while in a place on Division Avenue, which I called the Peanut Factory. I don't know really what it was. But this area smelled something fierce from those peanuts.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I called him a would-be farmer. We had chickens, and he grew vegetables, flowers, and especially strawberries, which I had to help pick when I should have been studying for final exams. He sold them to the local stores. My brother also had a commercial greenhouse on Eatondale Avenue in Blue Point. He also one time worked for Pepsi-Cola, and then he was a fireman at Brookhaven Lab. But other than my own family, I don't really know.
Do you remember the local railroad station or when it closed?
I don't remember when it closed. I remember it being there, and I remember sometimes taking a shortcut across the tracks.
Do you remember any great stories or legends about Blue Point or Bayport?
I vaguely remember hearing something about Reed's Ice Cream Factory. I think it had turned into a nightclub, and a girl was killed there. And I know their ice cream was delicious. I recall more clearly that Mr. Reed was a member of my church, and we had at least one picnic on his gorgeous grounds. But other than that, it's vague.
So now we'll talk about the library a little bit. Do you remember when the library first opened? Probably not. Or when the library building was first built?
No, I don't remember dates. I just remember I have a picture of the building on Blue Point Avenue, which I helped clean up for the library. I was a Girl Scout at the time. I remember it was pretty dirty and had a lot of odd stuff in it, different books and things, but that's about what I remember.
Now, you said you spent a lot of time reading, and one of the places that sticks out in your mind is the library.
Right.
So what was the library like back when you were using it, when you were little?
When I was like a teenager, I believe it was that building which I have the picture of. And it seems to me that the boards even creeped.
Yeah.
So that's about, and it had the usual shelves and the librarian, and I just sat down in there and read.
Imagine it was a peaceful place to read.
Oh, yes, very much.
You mentioned that you were active in the Baptist church.
Right.
Yes. Can you remember anything about the church and the activities that you were involved in? You spoke a little bit about that before.
Mainly I just went to Sunday school, but my family was quite active in the Blue Point Baptist Church. My mother belonged to the Dorcas Society. They made bandages from old sheets for missionaries. She also taught Sunday school. My father was a trustee. He also was the sexton. He cleaned the place. I used to help him sometimes, and I remember being in the men's bathroom, and I saw a urinal for the first time. And he rang the bell on Sunday mornings. Sometimes he let me go up in the bell tower with him, and that was loud, and you could see far from up there. And one of my friends went to the Catholic Church, Our Lady of the Snow. On Sunday mornings, we'd run from the Baptist church to the Catholic church, And in those days, we wore dresses and hats to church, and we were hurrying back and forth. And then in 1957, I returned to the Baptist church to have my son dedicated. My mother, father, and 2 sisters were buried from there also. The 4 of them and my husband are interred in the little cemetery behind the library. By the way, we also were married in the parsonage.
A long history with that church.
That's right.
Were you active in any other local businesses or organizations?
Just the Girl Scouts. That's about it.
So what is the biggest change that you've seen here in Blue Point since you've been little until now?
It's hard for me to say. Everything seems to have gotten bigger and more modern, because I'd say I lived in a different part of town, so it was more rural. So, and those houses in that area now have gotten bigger and better too, so not much else.
What do you miss the most about the way it used to be?
I like the ruralness, but that's kind of hard to put a word on, really.
And lastly, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to add?
There's a few things. And one of the questions I'd like to answer too is what I did for fun. One thing, I wasn't much of a moviegoer, probably because as a young child I was terrified by The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
And as I said, I wasn't part of the mainstream. I think many teenagers used to hang out at a soda fountain on Main Street in Bayport. I used to go with my parents to watch my brother play basketball. Sometimes we'd go out east to pick beach plums. My mother made jelly with them. And my parents didn't own a TV when they first came out, so for a while I'd go around the corner to Eatondale, to a Peggy Moon's house. We weren't real close friends, but she and her family invited me over there. I'd make a batch of fudge, and we'd enjoy a couple of hours watching shows like Milton Berle's Texaco Hour. One place I really miss was an area a little further up north from our home. It had small hills and a pond called Laurel Pond. And there was a different kind of tree growing there, which had large, heavy thorns. I used to go sledding there in the winter and loved just walking around the area in the summer. I went back there a few years ago, and there's no trace of the hills, the pond, or the tree. I do miss it. If you're ready for some personal thoughts. Some old-timers might remember the kid who walked a goat occasionally down Blue Point Avenue. That, of course, was me. If they remember hearing little chicks peeping in the little post office by the school, they were my dad's, waiting to be picked up. The post office people were always happy for them to leave. And I remember the Bayport High School basketball team won the Long Island Championship in the late 40s. They also played a game of donkey basketball. They rode trained donkeys. Once they played the Harlem Globetrotters.
So they actually rode donkeys and played basketball? Oh,
Yes,
wow.
that was fun. And when they played the Harlem Globetrotters, I'm pretty sure it was in the Patchogue High School gym. Religion was a very important life part for, it's hard to say, for people. Right. It was for the peoples in the 50s. They really enjoyed their religion. We even had a baccalaureate service for high school graduates. And the other day I found a little card which we all had printed up with our name on. We passed them out at graduation. Now, each year when I go to the high school winter concert to see my grandchildren, I'm tempted to go on stage when the choral director invites the chorus alumni up to join in the Hallelujah chorus. But I'm afraid of embarrassing my granddaughter, so I haven't done it so far. I have one more year. I might do it. So
I think you should.
we'll see.
Do other people join?
No old people. No. It's all people like, apparently they just graduated or a couple years. But
Makes sense.
Well, maybe.
One more year.
Yeah, I'm still an alumni, so that's about it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming out today and sharing your memories with us. This marks the end of the interview with Bonnie Silsbe.